I don't care for the king.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love.
Yeah, this is it.
Did the Queen cure cancer? Did she end childhood poverty in England? What did she do? Here's what she did. She was 1, she was born, she was sperm lucky, and 2, she wasn't as fucked up and shitty as the rest of her family.
My opinion of the monarchy is that it's just very cringe. It's very cringe. It wasn't until fairly recently, like in the last couple of years, that I found out that people think that the Queen was actually decreed to rule the country by God. She's like a god queen.
The divine right of kings.
I didn't realise people were just walking about amongst us believing this shit. This is like the time when I found out that a guy I worked with didn't believe in dinosaurs, and I was like, it's not an option. You don't have an option to not believe in dinosaurs.
Bring up that really casually.
Somebody else said it.
As if that was an entirely normal opinion to have.
Somebody else was like, oh yeah, because Jack doesn't believe in dinosaurs, and I laughed thinking that I was missing some kind of in-joke.
So Jack's a fuckhead.
And he was like, no, he just doesn't believe in dinosaurs. And I was like, is he thinking about dragons? And he was like, no, he doesn't believe in dinosaurs. He's really religious. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean?
I remember when I found out that the DUP were like the people that don't believe in dinosaurs and stuff like that.
You don't get to decide to not believe in
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs.
Underrating party, is that what they're called?
Yeah, that's it. That's what it stands for. Because the Queen died just recently, it really focused my attention.
I was going to say content warning.
Smash the system.
We may make jokes about this, so if you are into the royal family and you liked the Queen, this might not be the podcast for you.
The thing is, I did.
Unavoidable.
The thing is, I kind of did like the Queen, despite everything that I think.
That's marketing, baby.
I know. But the Queen died, and I actually did genuinely feel really sad for about 24 hours.
You're one of the people. You are. Sorry, I've jumped massively ahead here. No, I was going to mention this on the podcast where I saw on Twitter. Now, you didn't tweet that you felt sad, to be fair, but there were people that I followed on Twitter, kind of left of centre type folk that, generally speaking, made a lot of sense. And then the day the Queen died, oh man, very culty, very mad takes. Oh. And it was I'm so distraught and emotional. It's so sad. It's that.
No, I just felt sad because she's been there my entire life. And
okay, but they would say things like that too, but why?
Well, because any big change like that is going to affect you. And
is it a big change though for you? Your daily existence on the planet? Is it a big deal?
It's a big symbolic change.
It's a big symbolic change, and so let me unpack my feelings here and work out, because it's my.
Justify yourself, come on.
I know. My reaction was just my reaction. That's just how I felt, and I'm not sure I can intellectually explain it because I don't agree with the monarchy existing. I suppose it comes down to I'm quite a pragmatist, and for all, in principle, if I was going to design a system, I wouldn't design a system where someone's just theoretically in charge of signing off on the laws until they die. That's obviously stupid. That was the system that we had, and while we had the Queen, she was doing the job well. She was doing a job I didn't think it should exist, but she was nonetheless doing that job well, and it did sort of work. And there is an argument to be had for saying that whilst you've got a head of state that's just appointed in that way, then prime ministers don't start thinking that they're presidents and then start thinking that they're kings. It sort of worked, and therefore the bit of me that thinks I don't think it should be that way, but at the same time it sort of works, so maybe don't fuck with it.
Did it work though? So just not to miss that point. So you were saying there that you thought, I don't agree with this, but she is in the role. I don't agree with the role, but she's there. Yeah. And you think that was cushioning the prime minister. It was sort of taking away the prime minister rushing off to become a king or whatever you would think. But did it work though? I mean, she could have said no to the Iraq war. She could have stopped.
But she can't. She couldn't, because that's not how the Constitution is.
So, how did she cushion them? What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
I mean, the situation is that she is essentially a diplomat. It was her job to sign the law, and it wasn't a law until she'd signed it, but she had no right to say no to signing a law.
Okay. It's kind of like a secretary almost.
I mean, it's like she lived in the palace, so the prime minister couldn't. That was about as much.
Literally, yeah.
See, I don't agree with the monarchy. I don't have any personal beef with any of the royals because...
I do.
Wait. Let me retract. I disavow Andrew. disavow. in general, I don't have a problem with them for the fact that they are members of the royal family because they were born into it, unless they married into it. If you're born into it, like William
You
and
have
Harry,
no choice.
those were little kids and they didn't choose that. And I mean, fair play to Harry for kind of fucking off and going and living his life.
And also
but
Princess Anne, to be fair.
It's a kind of fucking abuse because these kids are put in the public eye from the time they can stand up.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really unfair. And the way that people talk about them as if they own them. When Harry and Meghan started dating and everyone was like, I mean, she's coming in between those two brothers. I was like, you're a fucking psychopath.
This is like my mother talking about soap opera characters as if they were real and me not being able to tell the difference between people she actually knows and people that she's seeing on the telly.
They're sad though, so we were just not to miss that bit. So when she died,
Did you know what?
so why were you sad?
Why was I sad?
Did it make you think about your own mortality because she's always been there since you were a kid?
No, it wasn't that. It was that she really, really hated Margaret Thatcher and she really, really hated Boris Johnson.
And Blair, apparently.
And she really, really
did not
hated
like
Tony Blair.
Blair.
She seems to have had quite good taste. She really didn't like the Blairs. So she really
I
didn't
hate
like
you
Margaret
and your
Thatcher.
wife.
Well, yeah. And there's this brilliant story about Tony Blair having dinner with the Queen. And the Queen was sitting taking breadsticks from a container and breaking them into pieces. And so Tony Blair, being a psychopath, just mirrored her and was doing exactly the same thing. And apparently, like, after a few minutes of this, the Queen just turned to Tony Blair and went, mine are for the corgis, what are yours for?
I knew
Now
that.
tell me she's not worth mourning.
It's probably quite good because she would be one of the few people in the country that could just savage high-profile people with no repercussions.
Absolutely.
The whole lack of repercussions, mentioning Andrew, we'll get on to that. But yeah,
Nick's a good boy.
but you would broadly say that your interpretation would be, considering the power and role that she had, you felt, generally speaking, a good egg that handled that as morally well as she possibly could. Is that what you're saying?
Within reason. There's all sorts of things to complain about, and I wouldn't want to gloss over any of them, but it felt almost rude to suggest sacking her after she put in a 70-year shift. I mean, within a day or two, as you started to see Prince Charles now have to be King Charles. Right, this is fucking over. I'm done.
Yeah. Because my thing is, like, I don't really care if the Queen was a nice person or not.
Yeah,
I think
the position shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of besides the point. I just find myself really not caring. I do think that the pageantry and the way that this country went about mourning her death created a lot of fucking Republicans.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
We were driving through to Edinburgh. I remember realising, I think it was the third advertisement board that I'd seen, and I realised that every advertisement board had been replaced with the Queen, with a dead Queen board. Yeah. Is that going to be all of them? And it was all of them. And by the time I think I'd hit the 9th or 10th one,
call your dad.
I was like, right, this is a bit North Korea.
My brother, Chris, and I went over to theirs, and he was telling us that someone at his work had said, I mean, see what you want, but none of you'll be working till you're 93. And my brother turned around and went, she never fucking worked till she was 93. She lived till she was 93. It's not the same thing.
And also, we probably will be the way things are going.
Yeah, true. I remember a street party when I was a kid, when Charles and Di got married, and there was a free ice cream machine, and I could have as much ice cream as I wanted. I was probably pretty pro-monarchy that day. I had about 8 ice creams. It was probably sick. It was brilliant. That was great. I really enjoyed that. That's probably the high point of the monarchy for me. 8 ice creams in a day.
Well, I'm from a part of the country where you have like gala days and they have like a king and queen, like wee kids that do and all that stuff. You know, the actual royal family, I always thought of just as being like the same as like your gala king and queen. The kids that you just put up on a pedestal for a day and go, oh, look at that. Nice. It's just like a bit of a laugh.
It's like cosplay. It's
like a pantomime.
Yeah.
Just a sort of daft thing you do every so often. To play devil's advocate for folk who are like maybe pro-monarchy, they might say that it's just sort of like symbolic and it's benign and it doesn't play much of a role constitutionally. I kind of disagree with that. I think it does have a significant role, even though it may not always exercise the power that it's got. And they would say it's symbolic, right? But I would say symbols actually are important.
I would agree.
And it plays a sort of role in this kabuki theatre of British politics and the establishment and kind of protecting their role and kind of setting up this idea in everyone's head that there are people who are born more privileged and better than everyone else. And that is a sort of insidious thing, whereas it's not very obvious. They're not coming round and chopping your head off because you're like a serf or whatever. It's not like that kind of obvious, but it's just setting up this symbolic thing that you kind of have to doff your cap to.
Yeah,
That's
I would
what
agree.
my objection to it is.
Does that mean that, in a way, they're sort of the final boss of this podcast? Have we hit that point now? We've gone through all the fuckheads in the UK to eventually get to the root cause of the fuckheadery?
Maybe.
Because if that's the symbol at the top of the pile, it would explain why England has let everything else slide. They've kind of fallen into that slightly kind of fascisty, there are certain people that are just better than others kind of thinking, isn't it?
No, I don't think
Maybe.
they're the final boss. I think they're a symptom rather than like
Okay.
a cause.
I feel as if I've somehow come across as a closet monarchist. I'm not at all. We were having a very... No,
Backpedal now.
it's all right.
I think you can separate the person from like the role they were doing. It's like, sorry to, that's sad that old person.
But it's that is the issue, because I mean already people seem to be confused because, you know, the God Save the Queen, God Save the King sort of confusion. It's that people have been raised to invest in her, specifically her,
Yeah.
and that becomes a bit of it's an apology stance for all the rest of it. There's a football club in Glasgow that's very into her, but I feel that now it's
Are
Charles.
they going to have,
even they
are
might
they gonna
be
have a photograph of a guy up in the changing rooms watching them?
sort of these big ears,
This is an interesting point, though. There's a channel called Philosophy Tube who did an episode about why Britain loves the monarchy so much, and the conclusion of the video was basically everybody wants to fuck the Queen. Now, that's a little bit simplified, but everybody likes to feel that they are in some way connected to that. Not everybody, but these fucking weirdos who are royalists. They think that through their connection to the Queen, it elevates them as people as well, and it just makes them feel a little bit special.
I think there's a thing that's
Nobody wants to fuck King Charles except for Camilla. I don't know how...
I think that the way that I think about this is getting into we've just dove straight into like heavy psychology here, but I think there was something I noticed when she died. There was a lot of referring to her as the grandmother of the nation or the mother of the nation. That was quite interesting because to me it sort of implied that was the relationship that some people in society had with her. And you sort of think back to 1950s, Second World War. We've been through some quite heavy shit with the Nazis, which were now defeated. And then it is this sort of mother figure to bring stability. And for the boomer generation, there was a bit of growing up in a time where if you did work hard, you could generally speaking get ahead. The game was fairly fair. And there was a sort of traditional understanding that almost stemmed from the Queen down, as your mother. If you go to school and you do this and you get the job, you'll be just fine. And then our relationship with our parents, I guess, as millennials, not directly to our parents, but in a more general sense, has been what we've got now is actually quite bad because you guys haven't given us the stability that arguably we need. So I think that it's interesting a wee bit how now that Charles is the dad, that there's a bit more, oh, fuck off, look at this mess.
You're not my dad.
Yeah, it's not the same sense of stability.
Uncle.
I think that what you're saying about how people feel that the Queen elevates, I think it's probably twofold. I think it is that sense of I'm a fan of the Queen, therefore that makes me better. But also maybe a sense of I represent stability. I am normal. That's kind of thing what I'm trying to get around to. To us, they look like weirdos. But in their heads, I'm stability. I'm normal. And all you people that are saying I'm in a cult, you're the reason for all the instability and the weirdness. And I think that Charles, him taking on that role, it's a bit like the cult leader died and now we're trying to put a new cult leader in, but you can't one for one that, in a
cult leader's weird son.
So there are things that sort of exist within our society that are constructs, and they only exist because we choose to believe in them. So, like money and religion, and monarchy is one of those things. Have you ever read the last full novel that Douglas Adams wrote called The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul? It's brilliant. I get the feeling it's probably where Neil Gaiman took the idea for American Gods from. It is Neil Gaiman that wrote American Gods, isn't it? The idea is that all of the gods that human beings have ever chosen to believe in are real and exist, but only because we chose to believe in them, we made them real, and they're all still here, but they're now stuck in the 20th century as it was then. So Thor's been grounded and he's trying to get out the country and can't because he can't get through an airport because he hasn't got a passport because he's Thor, right?
Never gets through security with that hammer either.
Precisely this, and it's actually brilliant, and for some reason nobody seems to have almost noticed it, and I think it's amongst the finest stuff he wrote. It's a Dirk Gently novel again, so it's a sequel to Dirk
So you
Gently's
two are in agreement here, because I was saying right at the beginning that this is a top-down problem, where you're arguing that it's actually ground up.
It's ground up monarchy.
Created the monarchy
because we need it. My initial reaction really was I was just sad, and I did try and think about why I was, but you can't always work out why you feel what you feel. Sometimes you just feel, I genuinely did feel sad.
I did notice it on the day that people they were interviewing in the streets from Sky News, there was one guy that started to cry, openly crying on camera. And then I think the interviewer asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he just went, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And that kind of made the whole thing more and more absurd, where you've got this outpouring of grief that nobody could actually articulate why they were so upset, which again was a bit like a cult. The cult is saying we should all be upset, so we are. But then if you ask the cult member, "Why are you sad?" they go, "Oh, we don't know."
I don't know.
Because we haven't had a pamphlet to explain why we're
Here's
upset.
the thing that I sort of arrived at as I was thinking about all of this. I was saying, like, I am pragmatic, and the Queen was very, very good at staying within the lines of what was and was not proper for her role. And therefore, the bit of my brain that likes things to just work was happy that although that's not the solution I would have arrived at, that works. But now I realize, and I have spent some time thinking about this, that actually that's thinking about that the wrong way round, because she understood implicitly how precarious her position and her family's position was. She stayed within those lines. The result of that is that she gave an appearance of normality to a system that is anything but proper and normal, and that she did that because she believed in what she was meant to represent, and that therefore she understood how important it was to be proper so that she would not be deposed. What she was actually doing was making sure that the royal family continued. And I think the royal family probably will not continue in the same way that it has done, because I don't think Prince Charles has the self-awareness that the Queen had with regards to the fact that...
What does it mean, though? So we talk about representing. So you're saying that she wants it to continue, but what is it? Does anyone have an answer to that question? We've all now come into...
The divine right of, the divine right of kings.
Yeah, okay.
If you don't believe in the divine, you don't believe in the divine right of kings.
We are rolling that out. We're suggesting that everybody that is taken in by the monarchy in whatever capacity, at the core of it, what that's about is a god has selected a person for this role.
No, I blame Harry Potter.
Don't bring her up. Don't bring her into this.
I blame Game of Thrones.
Yeah, there we go. That's better.
So I think for some people, genuinely, they think that gods gave the Queen her position in life and blah, blah, blah. For a lot of normies, I don't think that that's why they like the Queen. I think it is just because people are really easily marketed to.
Yes.
That circus that went on,
performative grieving with
fucking
the Ministry
God.
of Silly Walks.
Jesus Christ, the queue. Do we remember the queue?
The queue, which was entirely a construct of simply not selling tickets online and telling people what hour to turn up. They wanted that queue.
It was fucking bonkers. Like, do you not realise that all over the world, countries are looking at us going, what the fuck's going on over there? They're getting weirder and weirder by the year. First Brexit. What the fuck is going on over there?
What's in the water over there?
It's time for England to become even more normal.
I was expecting them to stuff her and like put her up in display somewhere and like charge folk a couple of quid.
My theory was that she wasn't even in that coffin. I was like, that's just an empty coffin. Because why would you risk it? Look at all the scum coming in off the streets. So why would you risk them being that close to her?
Did you see the footage of the girl that was clearly off her tits?
No.
Oh, you've got to Google this. It's absolutely fantastic. There's one girl that quite clearly took an eckie or a trip or something like that. And she's, you know that footage of George Osborne on the front bench?
Oh, yes.
Right. That face. Yes. She's like...
I love that.
Look at the sparkles.
There is something like weirdly awe-inspiring if you go into like a big cathedral or some sort of palace, a big old building. You know, if you're just like an ordinary pleb like me, to see that kind of stuff, you do get that sense of, oh, there's something like bigger than me.
I've had a fly in Shawlands. It's just high ceilings.
Yeah.
But you get that sort of weird, sort of almost religious sense.
Yeah.
That you feel, oh, there's
But they were designed to do that.
That's exactly the point. Like, you can understand how people do get emotional about it and sort of feel a connection.
And they feel like they're
almost a religious
I'm
connection.
part of this. So you're going in and you're in awe of this building and there's this pageantry of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And you feel that I'm in it, I'm part of it, and it kind of validates you, even though you might be a bit crap.
It's like walking into like a Tolkien thing or, the Game of Thrones or something like that. It's like walking into this weird kind of otherworldly place.
Majesty.
Compared to your own kind of mundane life.
There's
there's
something incredibly problematic with the idea that some people are just born to be in charge as a result of being born from someone else. And I think it's worth bearing in mind how monarchies get started. Monarchies got started because one person killed somebody else and nicked his hat. It's like, it's my hat now. I'm in charge. I'm the biggest psycho. Over generations, you have one person that's an incredible achiever for whatever reason, and they do the Genghis Khan thing. They do more murders than anybody else. And they're in charge, and they have kids. And their kids then take it on, and they reckon it's like 2 or 3 generations to squander a fortune. But somebody that achieves in that way is going to have a little bit of kind of psychopathic fearless dominance. They have to. And that will be an inherited trait, largely. So then you end up a few generations on with people who don't actually have to do the murders anymore. But there is a little bit of them that's missing because that's just biology. And fuck me, we all know that they only bred with themselves for a while. And that's always, good for the gene pool. Yeah. So you end up with a Prince Andrew.
So this is, when I said at the beginning, this is why they are the final boss. Because if you look at what's happening with England versus, say, Scotland, where there's a desire to progress beyond that kind of thinking. Whereas in England, they seem to be in a bit of a midlife crisis state right now where we haven't really let that go. So you said about, it's my hat now. That's kind of their national identity. We want all the hats. They're our hats.
England still think they have an empire.
Well, this is what I'm trying to
kind of like
around.
But don't we control Wales?
Yeah, that's...
It's like a kid that
Welsh.
clinging on to his teddy bear a wee bit too long.
Yeah.
It's like England like that, with the monarchy. There's the whole like...
Well, literally, there's a Paddington Bear aspect to this. They are literally clinging to the teddy in this case, so yes.
He's all harking back to supposedly better past, this kind of nostalgia, which was all bound up in like Brexit and all that. Like,
and that's the mother aspect that I was saying about
Make Britain
there is this sort of like submissive child. I know that's a weird phrase, but then Prince Andrew, and it's like you're going, there's so much evil wrapped up in this, the core of it. But then that's why when a Boris Johnson happens, who is so obviously a little bit psycho and a little bit fascist, but everyone's like, he's a great character, because you've sort of been conditioned to think that psychopathic people are actually quite evil. Just a bit of a wacky guy, just like our wacky monarchy, our wacky characters, without realising these people represent arguably the worst aspects of humanity without fail. I don't know if it is ground up. I think it's top down. I think what's always happened is that, as you said, we've always had psychopaths, and with capitalism will always reward the psychopath, because if you have diminished empathy of any level, it's going to be easier for you to get ahead because you're more willing to do the stabby stab bit, or whatever it's going to be, or steal the money, or whatever it's going to be, and therefore they end up in charge. We're now, because we've evolved as a society, the group is going, we're not so keen on these psychos anymore, actually, and we're going to band together to fucking get rid of them. And that seems to have kind of happened most places apart from England, where they're still in that stage of, we're not sure, actually, we quite like our psychos to be in charge, and we do sort of still believe in the idea that God selects the leader, and we do sort of think that we kind of should own everything anyway. And it's sort of that frustration of, this is so obviously going to go away eventually, could you just get with a fucking programme, and get on with it? Because steadily Scotland has moved on, because we were there, we were doing the British Empire shit too, we were part of all that. But I feel that steadily over the 20th century into the 21st, we've kind of evolved to become seen as this very inclusive, quite progressive, welcoming kind of country. Whereas England, they don't have that. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we have things like kilts, and our national anthem isn't just a love letter to a monarch. We've kind of got an identity beyond that's my crown now. Whereas a lot of England, they don't have a national dress. They don't have a sort of sense of who they are.
They don't have a national anthem.
They haven't had the steady waning off of, you're getting a bit old now for the imaginary friend. You're getting a bit old now for the teddy. Let's not take the teddy now. You're going into primary 2. You're a big boy now. It's like, no, I want my Paddington. Just let me have my Paddington.
Yeah.
There's a kind of sadness to that as well.
So I think this thing is like multifaceted. Yeah, there's this sort of pathological love of the monarchy and of being subject. And that's all very strange. There's the opulence, right? And like the wealth and the opulence that the royal family portray. And we know as a society, we fucking hate the poor are scum. The rich are rich because they're good and they worked for it and that they should be there. So that also sort of gives them this kind of halo effect that they're in these palaces and surrounded by all this extravagant wealth because they're better than you and they should be there. And then you've also got the sort of military aspect where, you know, it's Her Majesty's Royal Forces. So that's a whole sort of indoctrination pipeline for all of those boys. And then,
that's when I first clocked how weird it all was when I was in the RAF. Up until that point, I a bit like you. I don't really agree with the role, but I'm not furious at the Queen. I don't have that, you know, fuck the Queen kind of whatever sort of mentality. But as I was in the RAF, that's when the cult aspect of it really starts to become quite glaringly obvious. Oh no, this is actually really, really problematic. Like, this is not a good thing that humans should be doing. I think actually even people like Nicola Sturgeon actually I think may have had a bit of a similar journey to this because the SNP as it stands are kind of for the monarchy. Salmond was definitely a monarchist.
Oh god, yeah, but that's just because he's such a fucking creep.
Yeah. But I think Nicola has probably gone for a bit of a I don't have a strong view on it, and I think now that she's been in the leadership role and has had to actually go and interact with it, she's like, oh, this is fucking bananas. And I think there is going to be a steady move around to the Republican. The Greens at the beginning of that, you can feel the swing starting to happen that Scotland, an independent Scotland should be a republic. But I think it is that what you're saying there, that until you're sort of confronted with it, and I guess in Glasgow, because again, that football team, we are sort of confronted with it more frequently than in other places where it might just be a bit kind of weird, but ultimately harmless. But whereas I was confronted with how badly wrong that could go aspect of it.
That's definitely true, right? So the football sectarianism thing, even in Edinburgh, that's not a thing to the extent that it is in Glasgow. So I moved to Glasgow about 12 years ago, and it might sound ridiculous, but I just hadn't actually paid any attention to it. If I'm not interested in something, I don't tend to pay any attention to it, and I'm not fucking interested in football at all. So I wasn't really aware of the sectarian football thing at all. And when I first moved across there, I was like, what the fuck is that noise? Why are there a load of fat men in orange walking past my window? What the fuck is that about? And, you know, when you start speaking to Glaswegians about it, they're explaining to you. And as they're explaining it to you, you realise that they start to realise how ridiculous it is. Even though they know it's ridiculous, like having to explain it to an ingenue really, really makes them realise how fucking ridiculous it is. And so I would say that until I was across here, yes, I'd never really thought of the thing of the Queen or any of it. It was just background noise. Mm-hmm. And if you had asked me to design a system, it wouldn't have been the system I designed. If you'd asked me if I thought that it should continue, I'd have said no. Mm-hmm. You know, if you'd asked me to vote in a referendum on getting rid of the monarchy, I'd have voted to get rid of the monarchy. But it wasn't on my top 10 to-do list. Right? It's just, I mean, yes, it's not right. Yeah, it's an issue, but it's not the most pressing issue to me right now. And then you move across here. I'm sorry, I don't know his name because I don't care, but the football manager at Rangers, there's this footage of him the first time he's been shown around the changing room and he spots the photograph of the Queen and there's just this little look on his face where he goes like, right? Yeah. And has to suppress a laugh.
I actually said similar to Alex Salmond when I interviewed him about this, because when you go into the Scottish Parliament, the very first thing you see is a picture of the Queen. And I said to him, can you really claim to be a progressive when you're defending this? And this sort of comes back to why England is stuck where it is, because even the English left, so when the Queen died, left-wing people in England that I would otherwise have thought quite normal tweets would broadly agree, went very weird that day. And I put this to Salmon saying, these two things are fundamentally incompatible. You cannot be a progressive, you cannot push for progressive politics and change whilst defending this.
It's like a Christian astrophysicist.
Yeah, it's a complete contradiction. And of course, Salmon said, no, it's not, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, it is. I'm right. You know, and I think that is why in Scotland we are clearly, and it has been a slow step. I mean, it's taken a while for us to kind kind of get up to faintly jogging speed with this, but we're getting there now. Whereas England, I say, it is just clinging and clutching to that thing. But it's why a lot of the Tony Blair and Keir Starmery energy, where you're not really a progressive, you're kind of saying you are, but you're not really. Whereas a Jeremy Corbyn, you're going, yeah, actually, this guy might have a little bit more, actual backbone about him, because as far as I know, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't agree with the monarchy either. So therefore, when he says, I think we should do progressive lefty stuff, you're like, yeah, this motherfucker believes what he's saying. He means it. Whereas when Tony Blair and Keir Starmer do it, you're going, you don't really think that, do you? Because if
you're just saying what people want to hear.
Yeah, you'd be offended by this concept. And I think that, I say, Nicola has slowly is coming round to that philosophy, I think.
I also think it'll be an awful lot easier to sort of break free of the spell of that now that the monarch is essentially quite dislikable.
Yeah.
Yeah, housing a paedophile will do that to your organisation.
Yeah, and you've not got the halo effect that the Queen had, where she was a sweet little old woman. We don't have that. We've got fucking Charles.
No, I mean, do you remember when she had to meet Trump and he kept her waiting? And it's one of those moments where I had to sort of resolve things within yourself. Like, yeah, I don't agree with the monarchy, but right now I am thinking, how fucking dare you orange cunt. I don't believe in the monarchy.
Just turned me into a royalist. Well done, Donald.
Yeah. One of the best bits of that fucking bit of nonsense was I think they had to have a state dinner for him. I mean, Princess Anne doesn't generally do any royal stuff at all, and she hasn't given her kids titles and stuff like that, which I'm quite inspired by. And I know somebody whose ex-girlfriend used to work as a waitress in a restaurant when she was young, some little fucking pizza place that her and her mates used to go to, where they knew that they could just kind of fly under the radar. And apparently she's a very, very nice person, and she treats wait and staff well, the things that are hallmarks of being decent people. So that's nice to know. But she turned up for the state dinner. Princess Anne was there for the state dinner. I thought, you're just there to watch. I saw a little bit of footage of it. She's just watching Trump. You're just there for a neb. Brilliant.
Have we got any final thoughts on the Queen? Because I feel we should maybe move this on to Charles and the rest of them now.
Oh, do we have to? See, even I, as a staunch anti-royalist, I would rather talk about the Queen than Charles. I did like the Queen more than I like this lot.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Charles and Diana?
So what my theory...
How they killed the people's princess!
We'll get to that. But I mean,
the theory that I like is that...
wait. No, we're not doing the death bit yet. Let's start with the age gap bit.
So my theory was all-encompassing for that whole...
Okay.
Well,
I thought, sorry, when you said
getting together.
No. That's right. Go on.
My theory was that when Charles came to the Queen and said, I love Camilla, she looked at her, looked at Charles, went, fuck no, imagine what your weddings would look like. What we need is to get... We've had too many generations of inbreeding, and now you're all getting ugly as fuck.
Your children are going to have chins.
I need you to go out and find a young lassie, good breeding, good looking, get a couple of wins at her, and then you can have Camilla. And then we'll get rid of Diana somehow.
Can she be a reasonably similar age to me, Mum? No, she must
has
be
to be
16.
Go and get a child bride.
Because if I have this right, when they were first getting together, Diana and Charles, he was in his 30s, I think, and she was a teenager. I think we can check the ages on this. I thought she was 16.
Yeah, she was. And he talks about meeting her when she was younger than that and saying that he thought she was a jolly and attractive child.
I'm about to turn 35, and this is a bit like me bringing a 16-year-old round to meet the relatives. I mean, this would be like a hard drive check immediately on this man.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of not talked about.
Decision nonce.
This right from the jump, we've got something that's a bit odd. But this even goes back to the Queen and Philip, as far as I know, that she was 13, and he was corresponding with her when he was, I don't know how...
Normal to write to your cousin.
Is it though?
Does this go back to times when like all the kids would die of like dysentery when they were like 2 years old? So you had to have a woman who would be able to breed for like 30 years to get enough kids to have your heir.
Yeah. So we talk about like the Prince Andrew thing on the subject of paedophilia, basically. We talk about that in isolation. But there is a bit of a pattern of weird Nancy-ish behaviour, let's say that.
Christ, if you go back to Elizabethan period, for instance, I think Juliet is 14 and Romeo is in his 20s. It was perfectly normal back then for as soon as a woman hit breeding age, literally, you'd got to get a couple of wains in her before she fucking died by setting herself on fire. one of the biggest causes of death of women was long skirts getting caught in open fire. So
Was
it
that
was
happening
like,
in the 80s when we got married? Is that Charles? And
no,
Diana?
I'm just talking about sort of the history of it. So,
That's
you know,
quite key though, isn't it?
and when you look at what's essentially an arranged marriage, as it really was.
Charles was engaged to Diana's sister, and then she embarrassed him by going to the press and talking about it. So then he called off that engagement and got engaged to Diana.
That's awful. Fucking
Yeah.
You could argue that, you know, arranged marriage, another way to say that would be abuse. People are like,
You can't say arranged marriage as abuse because it's not always. Some cultures have always arranged marriages.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it was
I
abuse.
suspect
I
she
think it would
probably
be-
could have said no.
Yeah, I think she was quite into the idea initially, and then when she actually got in, she was horribly treated quite a lot of the time by everyone involved, including him, who obviously was really into Camilla still.
But it's kind of a victimization of some kind, isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't it?
I think so. I think
You
she,
need
she
to
was
look-
too young to really be making this. Like,
Well, that's the point, isn't it? That's what I'm saying. So that kind of slight normalization again, you know, technically within the law, technically, but it is sort of suggesting a normalization of behaviour that potentially Andrew himself might go, I can't really see a problem with this, Emily
let's look
Maitlis. And you're going, well, the rest of us really can. So
There's issues with the entire kind of structure of the way we princessify girls, isn't there? You know, do you want to be a princess and eventually the queen?
So we're seeing
Yeah,
final bossing. You've got
it's
that
a-
again from the top down. Actually, if you look at particularly the monarchy structure from the top down, there is a little bit of a normalization of you're a little princess, you're a little girl, and the guy in his 30s marries little girls like you when they're princesses. That's a bit fucking weird. The way that is not from the ground up, from the top down, that's then normalized. And I'm sure the headlines from the Sun back then about Diana must have been creepy as shit because that's just what they would do. And then suddenly
they had
Johanna
to
had
count
Pablo
down on Charlotte Church being legal. So
yeah, so, but I'm saying top down. It's like the society is seeing this to you as opposed to the ground up, you know, and I think perhaps because things have mercifully moved on a bit, you know, this our generation I've grown up in is aware of how odd some of this is.
It's not really moved on that much. I would actually say it's probably more rampant because it's not just coming from one shitty news rag. People are just openly saying it to their pals like on Twitter and stuff like that. People are just saying these things. People were doing countdowns to like Millie Bobby Brown becoming legal. I don't usually say this to anyone who's not me, but have you thought about killing yourself?
I mean, the Evil Mouse Company princesses, that's all kind of connected in with what we're talking about here, isn't it? I mean, the Disney princess thing.
Yeah.
Again, you're sort of instilling that idea. That's an ideal that a child should aspire to. And that's all kind of tied up in the monarchy as well. Andrew is sort of talked about as a side point. And I think the media and the monarchy have tried to do that to go, well, we know he's a bit weird, but he's not part of this. And you're going, no, actually, his behaviour is entirely on brand for what you represent, actually, when you start putting these dots together. And there seems to be quite a lot of that in the media, trying to kind of conflate and merge and smudge around what
he's
the
just
monarchy
the one that
really
was
is.
too stupid to market himself appropriately.
Big shout out to Emily Maitlis. Happy you've now left the BBC, and I know it sounds like trashing them on the way out the door. Fantastic work, because she's come out going, yeah, it's a big fucking problem that you're actually actively told not to pursue real journalism and ask serious questions
tell you
about the
what,
leadership of this country.
You watch Emily Maitlis's face through that, and Emily Maitlis is like just fucking, she needs a bandage to hold her jaw up, doesn't she?
Her talent as an interviewer, is that face. She asks the right questions. She could probably have gone further, but the reason she got such a great reaction from him was he would give an answer and her face is saying, no, they're not going to buy that, mates, do better. She's not saying it. And then he starts to get gradually more and more uncomfortable.
But his people thought it had gone great, and he thought it had gone great. He had no idea what he'd revealed there. I mean, he's that fucking stupid.
Yes.
The Newsnight people, they absolutely knew what they had.
Yeah.
And he thought he was up to doing that. And I mean, this is the kind of the hubris of the Dunning-Kruger effect at work of somebody that thinks, yeah, I'm Prince Andrew, because he's probably dominated in relationships with people who are in awe of his fucking royalty all his life. And he's had people defer to him all his life.
Surrounded by lapdogs.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
saying yes to them.
And then you get a smart woman who is had to put up with shite off all sorts of people all her working life, who's not falling for that whatsoever.
It's also the thing where it's quite well known that psychopaths will represent themselves in court because they think they can do better than a lawyer.
Yeah.
Like Ted Bundy represent themselves. It's like, yeah, that's quite common. For
Hence
people,
the old saying that the person that represents themselves has a fool for a client.
they think they are much more competent at things than they actually are.
I think he genuinely thought that people would believe that he'd been in Pizza Express.
Because he's Prince Andrew and they're just the public.
Because nobody has ever told him that his shit smells.
Coming back to the point of like everyone wants to fuck the Queen, it doesn't ring true for me personally, but I don't know if this is my personal bias because I think that whole attitude towards the Queen is very English, it's very down there. I don't see it as much up here. The people who love the Queen up here, it's like sort of tautological almost. It's like, I love the Queen. Why do you love the Queen? Because I love Rangers. Why do you love Rangers? Because I hate Catholics. Why do you hate Catholics? Because I love Rangers. Why do you love Rangers? Because I love the Queen. And it's like, where does this come from? How do we untangle this mess? So I feel like the motivations behind that are very different from what they are down south. And even though they're weird in themselves, they're kind of less weird than they are down there.
It's also kind of like the Catholic thing up here is always quite interesting. So me and my pal Pete, I'm like half Protestant, half Catholic, but I was raised Protestant. I went to like a bit Protestant church, whereas he's definitely Catholic.
You're a child of two worlds.
Yes, but we, as a sign of solidarity, he would say fuck the Pope, I would say fuck the Queen. That was our way of kind of saying goodbye to each other in the public, which we sadly can't do. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so this was our way of saying that actually, like, the Catholic Church is also quite problematic, also a fairly bad institution that's also rampantly paedophilic. So these two things can be bad at the same time.
Two sides of the same coin, baby.
Yeah, and that's sort of what our philosophy's always been that there's a weird kind of mirror thing going on there, and a lot of the I hate you, you hate me, I hate you, you hate me. There's a core commonality there.
Yeah, you sort of run it down of like, both have extravagant wealth that they didn't earn, both rely on people seeing them as better than everybody else, both have stupid hats, both have lots of paedophiles.
It's just horseshoe theory all over again, isn't it? The opposite sides of the same coin.
Well, effectively, the Queen was like the English Pope because she was head of the Church of England.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
the only reason we have a Church of England is because Henry VIII wanted to shag somebody else.
He was like, I'll get divorced because I can't keep cutting their heads off. I need to do something else.
It's actually it was as a result of Anne Boleyn, so it was the second of the sixth. Sorry.
Such a weird guy.
Fairly early gammon. Henry.
He probably had syphilis, and so he was probably insane.
I heard that. Yes. Just I was saying about sort of the church and the monarchy mirroring and all that. But what you're saying is that up here, people might just be a bit confused, whereas down south, we're saying that there might be more syphilitic. They may be more hardcore Paddington believers or whatever we want to say.
It's worth looking at so here Henry VIII is instrumental in England separating from the Catholic Church in Europe, and it's as a result of him not liking his first wife anymore because she hadn't provided him with a male heir. She'd only provided Mary, and he falls in love with some French tart. I mean, Anne Boleyn wasn't royal. She was from a completely different bloodline compared to all the inbreeding that had been going on, and she produced what was arguably the best monarch England had in terms of being actually a good ruler. Queen Elizabeth was unbelievably smart. She managed to fucking outfox all sorts of shit. She managed to stay on the throne for a long period of time. She managed to keep her autonomy as a monarch. She was really, really interesting. She was a good ruler, and she was as a result of outside blood. And I think one of the inherent problems with them has been just, stop fucking shagging each other.
Yeah.
I know.
Stop shagging your family and also children. Just find any other consented adult that you're not related to.
But then you look at the fucking tabloid response. Like, oh my God, we've got a ginger and a brown. Oh my God.
They're definitely not related. What are we going to do? There's no chance.
Yeah.
let's talk about James Hewitt without getting somehow involved in.
I love it when
sex or
newspapers
something.
just deliberately put profile pictures of the pair of them and you go,
Harry knows what's up, and I think that's actually one of the reasons why Harry was able to get out, because I think Harry was like, I'm going to do the fucking DNA test if you don't let me walk away from this
Gonna
shit
do it
show.
on Oprah.
But I think there's something to that. I know that there's the story that, well, Diana and James didn't meet, till years later, but I think actually it's pretty conceivable in the
And just-
timeline that could have happened.
just to provide a bit of balance, Harry doesn't look an awful lot like Diana's brother, his uncle. So,
That's worse.
So he could be his dad.
Is he ginger?
grass.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Well, maybe there's that.
It's excessive, the old ginger hair, so it can skip a few generations.
But yeah, I think that there's a kind of commonly held belief that Harry is not Charles's son. I think that's a reasonable statement, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I hope for his sake that he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I just don't know what good could come out of that for him.
I mean, he is suspiciously normal looking.
Yeah. 'Cause even William was quite a decent.
William
looking
looked
lad when he
fine
was
for a
younger.
while, and then the Windsor genes
And then
totally
it was
kicked
like-
in, didn't they?
Yeah, it was just like everything got a bit off.
He went from perfectly normal looking human being to, you're one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Harry does look quite a lot like Lord Spencer.
Okay, that's
Who
fine.
is-
I've never actually looked at a
is a
photo
redhead.
comparison, but I mean, certainly when you put the picture, I think it's notorious because it gets shared on Twitter quite a bit. In profile shots of James Hewitt and
nose
Harry
is
next
really,
to each other.
really similar
The
for
older
shape.
he's getting, the more he looks like James Hewitt, which I think when he was younger, it was a bit more conceivable that wasn't the case. But now the age difference or whatever, or
mean,
the age he is now.
To play devil's advocate, there is that theory that people are attracted to people who look like them. So
Yes.
if he had similar traits to the Spencer family, that might have
Yeah.
been the attraction in the first place. Although I find that psychology very weird. I
It
don't
doesn't
like
make it not true, though.
Yeah, true.
Now we get to talk about Diana and what happened. So
She died in a car accident, mate, because her driver was pissed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why was he pissed though?
We're just taking that at face value. That's what it is. We're not going to go down some
I think
conspiracy rabbit
sometimes,
hole with this.
so I think sometimes we really, really want the world to be organised because it's terrifying to think that somebody as big and famous as that could just fuck up in that way. But actually, there's a real scandal there in that because of who she was, she didn't fucking get taken straight into a hospital and they were trying to fucking...
They took pictures of her because she was dying. The press no, I'm fully with you on this. I don't think that it was, I don't think there's any conspiracy beside that. I do think that the Queen had the conversation of like, you can't marry Camilla because you're both fuck ugly and we can't have any more heirs that look like fucking yous. Go and shag somebody young and cute, and then once you've got a couple of kids in,
You can go and do what you want.
I think if they were going to kill her, they'd have killed her before they divorced and she came out and did all these interviews. Like, not after.
Yeah.
Do you think that we were only getting the beginning of what she knew? Is it conceivable that she might have known that Prince Andrew had some bad habits? Anything like that? Anything,
I think you need to look back at what was normal. Well, you need to look back at what was normal for the era. I don't
Did they
think...
think she was a threat, I guess, is the bottom line, just to move off the topic. So you just...
Almost certainly. And, containing the press. I think there's a few things that really, really annoy me about the narrative from that. One is that Tony Blair did this great thing of making the Queen understand that she needed to sort of publicly acknowledge this, that and the other, and irrespective of protocols. And I think, do you know what? Actually, from what I can gather, just speaking about them as human beings, the Queen had got her 2 grandchildren who just lost their mother in pretty fucking horrible circumstances. And she's trying to just fucking, right, you go do the protocol thing, we've got the kids here. And you've got Tony fucking Blair essentially saying we need some performative grief. Go fuck yourself.
Oh, if anyone knows about that.
Yeah.
Dude, we didn't quite get this Diana levels of grief when the Queen died.
No.
It was, I guess, less of a shock because she was like so old and stuff like that.
93 and died in her bed.
It was
than-
perfectly normal.
Thing to happen, like the performance of it and all that. I guess it's like people who maybe have a sort of pent up emotion within them, and then this thing happens where it feels like they've now got permission to like publicly express their feelings or something like that.
I mean, I think the thing that Diana's death and the Queen's death do have in common is the way that people talked about it And this is sort of back to what you said. When you ask them why they feel what they feel, they can't answer.
But they desperately want to insert themselves into this process, don't they?
And they say all the same things. Like, but she did so much for this country. I'm like, okay, could you give me a list?
Name 5.
Yeah. Name one. Honestly, real gem of a woman. She was so graceful. She was so elegant, and she was so poised, and she was so. And I was like, what are you talking about? She was a fucking monarch. What is this? She just did so much for us, and we owe her so much. Oh, fuck all, mate. I don't want to fucking. Just tell me exactly, without using the same language as everybody else is. Tell me what you feel and why you feel it. And they can't do it because it is just a marketing campaign that people have bought into.
What was the media perception of Diana before she died? When people talk about the people's princess, were the media demonising her?
Yeah, well, they didn't always demonise her. So when she was marrying into the royal family and all that, she was the people's princess, and she was beloved, and she was, oh, look what she's made. It was all that kind of thing. The thing that they do with Kate just now, it was all that. Oh, we love Diana. Oh, look at the charity work she's doing. And then after the divorce and after like the interviews and all that, then she was portrayed more like a harlot, and it was all that misogynist bullshit. The perception of her in the press, they portrayed her completely differently, and this was quite, like, for Diana, she had always spoke to the press. She had contacts in the press because they loved her and she would talk to them, and then it was like on a dime the whole institution turned against her, and then after she died it flipped back the other way.
So is that just when you said before, yeah, she was a threat to the monarchy, is there a connection there that the establishment went, we have a problem here and we need to make sure she's thought of as harlot, liar, in kind of the same way you see a parallel with that now with Harry and Meghan, because they're coming forward. So yeah,
that's
that's just perfectly normal behaviour. People circling the wagons. Yeah,
exactly. So again, to come back to this is top down, not ground up. That actually that decision, the way it's turning like that, does not feel organic. It does not feel natural. It feels like somebody is being led in that direction.
So I mean, the palace would have been briefing against her without a shadow of a doubt. But by the same token, you know, the tabloid press will just go with whatever is going to sell newspapers.
So although they didn't directly kill her, what I'm coming around to here is you could argue if they were briefing against her, they are stirring the pot a little bit about, well, this Diana Spencer needs to come across like she's a harlot and really not one of us and boo-boo hiss. And therefore, that's when all the paparazzi obsession begins. Or is that not correct?
There was also just a lot of public interest in Diana. The reason that the press were always after her was because people were interested. People were buying papers with Diana on the front page.
And I'm just going to say it, she put herself out there for that. As a grown adult, she made the decision.
Yeah, she's like hanging around all with celebrities and stuff like that.
And before they turned on her, she established relationships with the press. She liked the press. She liked the media attention because it was all positive.
So that's a parallel there with Harry and Meghan, and the comeback would be, well, if they wanted to be left alone, they shouldn't have gone and spoken to Oprah. That would be the comeback on that, isn't it?
Quite a good point, to be honest with you. You know, you want to be left alone, fuck off, go and be left alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference with Harry and Meghan was that they were never going to get positive press the same way that Diana did initially, because if they wanted that, then she should just have not been black, because that was never going to fly in this country.
Oh, it's bad enough that he's ginger.
Yeah.
It's the worst of all worlds for the English. Oh no. Right, final thoughts on the monarchy.
So when the Queen died, I didn't feel any joy. I didn't get any personal joy from the Queen dying because I didn't have any actual issue with her as a person. It's just the institution that she represents that I think shouldn't exist, because as Tucker was saying earlier, if I had to craft a nation from the ground up, it would not include a monarchy, because that's an insane thing that doesn't make any sense, and it makes people behave odd, very odd, and
view the oppression inherent in the system.
Exactly. I just think it brings out the most cringe in people when you see them openly campaigning for everybody to show deference to these people who were born better than you. It's weird. It's weird and I don't like it, and it's very cringe. That's my...
No one's better than me just because their ancestor nicked somebody else's hat.
Yeah.
Exactly. Gives people like Prince Andrew the power and the protection of an institution to be able to go out and do horrendous things to people and then face no real punishment for it.
Other than dog sitting.
Yeah. So all in all, I'm against it.
Well, let's trust kill the Queen. We forgot about that bit.
Oh, yeah. Bitch. Sleeper agent.
I fucking hate the Queen. I'm glad she's dead. I don't know why anybody in America gives a flying look about the Queen. Fuck that old lady. I don't like hereditary people inheriting fucking wealth and power. Fuck the Queen. Fuck the Queen. Fuck the Queen. Fuck the Queen. The Queen.
Get a couple of dozen of your mates and go down to Buckingham Palace and kill the old bag.
To what end? Are you an old sea captain? What is this shtick that you...